I overheard my parents arguing about me at 2 a.m., and now I understand my entire childhood. The floorboards creaked under my bare feet as I stood frozen in the hallway, my hand still gripping the bathroom doorknob I'd just released. Through the thin walls of our split-level house, my parents' voices carried from the kitchen below with a clarity that made my stomach drop. It was 2:14 a.m. on a Wednesday in March, and I'd woken up thirsty, nothing more. I was 17, 3 months from graduation, and in 14 minutes, my entire understanding of my life would shatter like cheap glass hitting concrete. My mom's voice cut through first, sharp and desperate in a way I'd never heard before. "We can't keep lying to him, David. He's going to find out eventually." My dad's response came quieter, measured, the same tone he used when explaining why I couldn't have something I wanted. "He doesn't need to know. It'll destroy him." I pressed my back against the hallway wall, my heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. The water I'd wanted was forgotten. Every instinct screamed at me to go back to my room, to unhear what I was hearing, but my feet wouldn't move. I'd always been the good kid. Honor roll every semester since 6th grade, varsity track, debate team captain. My parents were proud of me, or at least that's what I'd always believed. Dad coached my little league teams until I was 12. Mom never missed a meet, a tournament, a parent-teacher conference. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable enough in our 3-bedroom house in suburban Connecticut. Normal, safe, predictable. The kind of childhood that doesn't make for interesting stories, which had always suited me fine. My younger sister Lily was 14, obsessed with her phone and her friends, the typical teenage girl who rolled her eyes at everything I said. We fought over bathroom time and who got the car on weekends. Standard sibling stuff. There were no red flags, no warning signs, nothing that would have prepared me for what I was about to learn. Or maybe there were, and I'd just been too trusting, too comfortable in my understanding of who I was, to see them. "He asks about it sometimes," my mom continued, her voice cracking. "The medical records, the baby photos. He's not stupid, David." My dad's chair scraped against the kitchen floor. We agreed. We made a promise. A promise. About me. About medical records and baby photos. My mind raced through possibilities, each one worse than the last. Was I adopted? Sick with something they'd hidden? The product of an affair? My hands were shaking now, and I pressed them flat against the wall to steady myself. The heating vent near my feet pumped warm air that suddenly felt suffocating. I wanted to burst into the kitchen and demand answers, but something held me back. Some primal instinct that whispered if I revealed myself now, I'd never hear the truth. They'd lock it away again, bury it under more lies, more careful explanations that didn't quite add up. So I stayed hidden in the dark hallway, listening to my parents discuss me like I was a problem to be managed rather than their son. "Do you remember what Dr. Kaplan said?" my mom asked. The name meant nothing to me. I'd never heard of any Dr. Kaplan. Our family doctor was Dr. Singh, had been since I was 8. "That was 15 years ago, Rebecca. Different circumstances." "Different?" "David, we stole him. We committed a felony." The world tilted. The wall against my back felt like it was the only thing keeping me upright. Stole. Felony. The words didn't make sense in connection with my parents, with my life, with anything I understood about reality. My mom was a high school English teacher. My dad worked in insurance. They recycled religiously and voted in every election and had never so much as gotten a speeding ticket that I knew of. They didn't steal. They didn't commit felonies. But my mom had just said they did, and the way my dad didn't deny it, didn't correct her, made my chest constrict like someone was sitting on it. I don't know how long I stood there. Could have been 30 seconds. Could have been 5 minutes. Time had become elastic, meaningless. My dad was speaking again, quieter now, and I had to strain to hear. "We saved him. You know what would have happened otherwise. That doesn't make it legal. It made it right." My mom's sob cut through the house like a knife. "I love him like he's mine. You know I do. But he deserves to know where he came from, who he really is, who I really was. As if the person I'd been for 17 years was just a character I'd been playing, a role they'd assigned me without my knowledge or consent. I thought about all the times I'd looked in the mirror and tried to find myself in my parents' faces. I had my dad's height, or so I'd always thought. My mom's eyes, everyone always said. But now those observations felt like lies I'd told myself, connections I'd invented because I needed them to be true. What if I'd never actually looked like them at all? What if I'd just wanted it so badly that I'd made myself see it? The kitchen went quiet. I heard the refrigerator hum, the ice maker drop cubes into its tray with a mechanical clatter. Then my dad spoke, and his voice carried a finality that made my skin crawl. "We tell him nothing. Not now, not ever. This stays buried, Rebecca. For his sake and ours. David, I mean it. This conversation is over." Footsteps. Coming toward the stairs. I moved on pure instinct, my body operating independently of my frozen brain. I was back in my room with the door closed before I even registered making the decision to flee. I stood in the darkness, my back against my bedroom door, my heart slamming against my ribs so hard I thought it might crack them. The house settled back into silence. I heard my parents' bedroom door close, The bathroom light clicked off. Everything returned to the quiet, ordinary rhythm of a sleeping household. But I couldn't sleep. I couldn't even move. I just stood there until the first gray light of dawn started filtering through my window, trying to process what I'd heard and failing completely. I went to school the next morning because I didn't know what else to do. My mom made me breakfast like she always did, scrambled eggs and wheat toast, asking about my history test later that week. My dad read the news on his tablet and reminded me to put gas in the car before I drove Lily anywhere. It was so perfectly, horrifyingly normal that I started to wonder if I'd dreamed the whole thing. Maybe it had been a nightmare, my subconscious working through some teenage anxiety about identity or belonging. But when I caught my mom watching me across the breakfast table, her eyes red-rimmed and exhausted, I knew it had been real. Every word, every impossible, life-destroying word. I pushed my eggs around my plate and mumbled something about not being hungry. Lily complained about a girl in her math class. Dad kissed Mom goodbye and headed to work. The machinery of our family life continued turning like nothing had changed, like my entire foundation hadn't just been revealed as a fiction. At school, I went through the motions, showed up to classes, took notes, nodded when teachers called on me. My best friend Kyle asked if I was feeling okay during lunch. I told him I was just tired, hadn't slept well. It wasn't even a lie. He accepted it without question because why wouldn't he? I'd never given him reason to doubt me before. I was the reliable one, the stable one, the guy who had his act together. I went to track practice after school and ran until my legs burned and my lungs screamed, pushing myself harder than I ever had before. Coach Bradshaw pulled me aside afterward. "Whatever you're working through, Thompson, channel it. That was your fastest time this season." I nodded, unable to explain that I wasn't working through something so much as running from it. From the truth. From my parents. From myself. That night, I waited until everyone was asleep and then went hunting through the house. I didn't know what I was looking for exactly. Proof. Answers. Something that would either confirm or deny what I'd heard. I started with the home office, the filing cabinet where my parents kept important documents. My birth certificate was there, yellowed and official-looking. Daniel Robert Thompson, born March 15, 2007, at St. Mary's Hospital in Hartford. Mother, Rebecca Ann Thompson. Father, David Michael Thompson. It looked legitimate. It looked real. But if what my mom had said was true, if they'd stolen me, then this was fake. A forgery. A piece of paper that documented a lie. My hands trembled as I photographed it with my phone, though I wasn't sure why. Evidence, maybe. Something to prove to myself later that I hadn't imagined all of this. I found our baby photo albums in the living room bookshelf, dusty and untouched. Flipping through them in the dim glow of my phone's flashlight, I saw myself as an infant, a toddler, a young child. But the photos started when I looked about 6 months old. There were no newborn pictures, no hospital shots, no photos of my mom pregnant. I'd never thought about it before, never had reason to question the narrative of my own existence. But now, looking at these albums with new eyes, the absence screamed at me. Every family had newborn photos, didn't they? Pictures from the hospital, the first moments, the exhausted but happy parents cradling their hours-old baby. We had none of that. The earliest photos showed me in what looked like a park, bundled in a blue winter coat, my eyes squinting against bright sunlight. I looked healthy, happy, completely unaware that my entire life was built on a crime. I barely slept that week. Every night I'd lie awake, my mind spinning through possibilities, trying to construct a scenario that made sense. Maybe I was the child of a relative who couldn't care for me. Maybe my biological parents had died, and my mom and dad had taken me in through some informal arrangement that hadn't been properly legalized. Maybe this was all a misunderstanding, words taken out of context, my imagination filling in blanks with nightmare scenarios worse than reality. But my mom's words kept echoing in my head. We stole him. We committed a felony. There wasn't much room for misinterpretation there. I started Googling things in the middle of the night. Child abduction laws, statute of limitations on kidnapping, how to find out if you were a missing person. The search results were overwhelming and terrifying. I learned about the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, about Amber Alerts and custodial interference and parental kidnapping. I learned that thousands of children go missing every year, most taken by family members, many never found. Was I one of those statistics? Was there a family somewhere still looking for me, still hoping? Or had they given up years ago, moved on, buried an empty casket and tried to rebuild their lives around the hole I'd left? On Saturday morning, I told my parents I was going to the library to study. Instead, I drove to the Hartford Public Library and spent 3 hours searching through old newspaper archives. I didn't know what I was looking for exactly. Maybe a missing child report from 2007. Maybe something, anything, that would give me a clue about who I really was. The microfiche machines were ancient, the process tedious. I searched through newspapers from March through December 2007, looking for any mention of a missing infant. There were a few reports, but none that seemed to match me. A 2-year-old who'd been taken by his father in a custody dispute, later found safe. An infant abducted from a hospital in Massachusetts, found within 48 hours. Nothing about a baby taken in March, nothing that felt like my story. I left the library more confused than when I'd arrived, my eyes aching from staring at the screen for so long. That night, my mom knocked on my bedroom door. I shoved my laptop under my pillow, paranoid she'd somehow know what I'd been researching. "Can I come in?" she asked, her voice soft. I told her yes because saying no would have been suspicious. She sat on the edge of my bed, her hands folded in her lap. She looked tired, older than her 43 years. "You've seemed off this week," she said. "Is everything okay? School? Friends?" I almost laughed. The absurdity of it was overwhelming. My mother, who had apparently stolen me as an infant, asking if I was okay. My mother, who'd been lying to me for 17 years, concerned about my well-being. I wanted to scream at her. I wanted to demand the truth. But I also wanted to keep pretending, to stay in the comfortable fiction of our family for just a little while longer. Because once I confronted them, once I forced the truth into the light, everything would change. There would be no going back. "I'm fine," I lied. "Just stressed about college applications." She reached out and brushed the hair from my forehead, a gesture so familiar and maternal it made my throat tight. "You're going to do great things, Danny. We're so proud of you." The words felt like acid. Proud of what? Proud of how well I'd played the role they'd assigned me? Proud of how completely I'd bought into their lie? I started skipping meals. Not on purpose exactly, but food just seemed irrelevant. My clothes started hanging looser. Lily noticed first. "Are you sick or something? You look like death." I told her I was fine, just busy. She didn't push it. Why would she? She was 14, wrapped up in her own world of drama and friends and figuring out who she was. At least she actually was my parents' daughter. At least her birth certificate wasn't a lie. I found myself watching her sometimes, looking for proof that she was really related to them in ways I apparently wasn't. She had my mom's nose, my dad's eyebrows, clear genetic markers that I'd always assumed I shared but now wasn't sure about. Did they look at her differently than they looked at me? Did they love her more, or differently, or more easily because she was actually theirs? The questions ate at me, poisoned every interaction, turned our house into a stage where we were all performing roles and only I knew the script was fake. 3 weeks after I'd first overheard my parents, I was in the guidance counselor's office discussing my college applications when Mrs. Patricia Ramirez, who'd been a counselor at our high school for 12 years, asked me a question that made my carefully constructed walls crack. "Have you talked to your parents about financial aid? I notice you haven't submitted the FAFSA yet." I told her I'd been meaning to. She gave me a sympathetic smile. "I know it's a pain, all those forms, but you'll need your parents' tax returns, their social security numbers, all that documentation. The sooner you start, the better. Social security numbers, documentation, proof of identity, proof of relationship. What if my parents couldn't provide those things? What if the paper trail that was supposed to connect us didn't actually exist, or existed, but told a different story than the one they'd been telling me?" Mrs. Ramirez noticed my expression change. "Danny, you okay? You look pale." I made up something about feeling dizzy, asked if I could get some water. She let me go, concerned, reminding me to make an appointment to come back and finish our conversation. I went straight to my car instead and sat in the parking lot, my hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles went white. That afternoon, I drove to St. Mary's Hospital. I didn't have a plan. I just needed to see the place where I'd allegedly been born, needed to make it feel real or prove it wasn't. The building was massive, modern glass and steel, clearly renovated since 2007. I walked into the main lobby and stared at the directory, unsure what I was even looking for. The maternity ward was on the 4th floor. I took the elevator up, my heart pounding. A nurse at the desk looked up as I approached. "Can I help you?" Her name tag read, Jennifer Cole, RN. I opened my mouth to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. What was I going to ask? Can you tell me if I was really born here? Do you have records from 17 years ago that might prove my entire life is a lie? She was still waiting, her expression shifting from helpful to concerned. "Are you looking for someone? A patient?" I mumbled something about being in the wrong place and left before she could ask more questions. Riding the elevator back down, I felt like an idiot. What had I thought I would accomplish? That I could just walk into a hospital and demand my records? That they'd hand over confidential information to a teenager with no proof of who he was or why he needed it? I started having panic attacks. The first one hit during calculus class on a Monday morning. My chest tightened, my vision narrowed, and suddenly I couldn't breathe. The room spun. I heard my teacher, Mr. Foster, asking if I needed to go to the nurse. I managed to stand, to stumble out into the hallway, to make it to the bathroom before my legs gave out. I sat on the cold tile floor of a stall, gasping, my whole body shaking. It passed after what felt like hours, but was probably 5 minutes. I splashed water on my face, avoided my reflection in the mirror, and went back to class. Mr. Foster asked if I was feeling better. I nodded. He didn't press. The panic attacks became a regular thing after that, sometimes multiple times a day. Sometimes I could feel them coming and hide before they hit. Sometimes they ambushed me without warning. I started carrying a water bottle everywhere, had learned that cold water helped sometimes. Kyle asked why I was acting so weird. I told him I was dealing with some family stuff. He offered to listen if I wanted to talk. I wanted to, desperately. But how could I explain that I suspected my parents had kidnapped me without sounding insane? On the first Wednesday in April, exactly 4 weeks after I'd first overheard my parents, I made a decision. I couldn't keep living like this, suspended between ignorance and knowledge, unable to move forward or go back. I needed proof. Real, concrete, undeniable proof. I waited until my parents went to work and Lily left for school, then called in sick. I went back to the home office and searched more thoroughly this time. In the back of the filing cabinet, behind tax returns and insurance policies, I found a manila folder labeled Legal Documents. Inside were our birth certificates, my parents' marriage license, their college diplomas, and a sealed envelope I'd never seen before. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a single piece of paper, a court document dated August 2007. It was a closed adoption decree. Names had been redacted, blacked out with heavy marker, but I could make out enough to understand the basic facts. A child, male, born March 15, 2007, had been legally adopted. The adoptive parents' names were listed as David Michael Thompson and Rebecca Ann Thompson. The biological parents section was completely obscured. I sat there on the office floor, holding this piece of paper that rewrote my understanding of everything. I'd been adopted. That part was apparently legal, documented, official. So why had my mom said they'd stolen me? Why the secrecy, the lies, the desperate 2 a.m. arguments about promises and truth? Legal adoptions didn't need to be hidden. They weren't felonies, unless something about this adoption hadn't been legal. Unless the court document I was holding was itself a lie, a way to legitimize something that had started as a crime. I photographed the document with my phone, my hands trembling so badly the first 3 photos came out blurred. On the 4th try, I got a clear image. Then I carefully put everything back exactly as I'd found it, closed the filing cabinet, and sat on the couch trying to figure out my next move. I needed help, professional help. Someone who understood the legal system, who could look at this document and tell me what it really meant, what might be hidden in those redacted names. I spent the next 2 days researching adoption attorneys in Connecticut. Most charged hundreds of dollars just for consultations. I had maybe $300 in my savings account from my part-time job at the grocery store. It wasn't enough. I considered going to the police, but what would I tell them? That I suspected my parents had committed a crime 17 years ago based on an overheard conversation and a legal-looking adoption document. They'd probably call my parents, who would deny everything, and then I'd have accomplished nothing except alerting them that I knew. I felt trapped, powerless, a minor in a system designed to keep adults in control. Then I remembered Mrs. Ramirez. She dealt with students' problems all day, helped kids navigate complex situations with colleges, with family issues, with life. Maybe she could point me in the right direction, or at least help me figure out who to talk to. On Friday afternoon, I went back to her office. She remembered me from our last conversation, smiled when I walked in. "Danny, good to see you. Did you want to finish discussing your college applications?" I closed the door behind me, which seemed to surprise her. "I need help with something else," I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears, hollow. "Something personal." Her expression shifted, became more serious. "Okay, what's going on?" I'd rehearsed this conversation a dozen times in my head, but now that the moment had arrived, the words felt impossible. "How did you tell a school counselor you thought your parents were criminals? How did you explain that your entire identity was in question?" I started with the easiest part. "I think I might have been adopted." Mrs. Ramirez nodded slowly. "And you're just finding this out now?" "Sort of. I found some documents. But there are things that don't add up, things my parents won't talk about." She leaned forward, her hands clasped on the desk. "Danny, adoption is nothing to be ashamed of. Many families—" "I know," I interrupted. "That's not what I'm worried about. I think something about my adoption wasn't legal. I think my parents might have lied to get me, or taken me from someone who didn't want to give me up." The room went very quiet. Mrs. Ramirez studied me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "Those are serious allegations," she said finally. "What makes you think that?" I told her about the conversation I'd overheard, about my mom saying they'd stolen me, committed a felony, about the lack of baby photos, the sealed adoption decree with the heavy redactions, the panic in my parents' voices when they talked about me finding out the truth. She listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she was quiet for what felt like a long time. "I'm going to be honest with you, Danny. This is beyond my scope as a school counselor. If what you're saying is true, or even potentially true, you need to talk to someone with legal expertise, a lawyer, or possibly law enforcement." My stomach dropped. I can't afford a lawyer, and if I go to the police and I'm wrong, or they don't believe me, my parents will find out and what? I didn't have a good answer for that. What would my parents do if they found out I knew? Ground me? Yell at me? They'd never been violent, never even particularly strict, but they'd also stolen a child, apparently, so who knew what else they were capable of? Mrs. Ramirez pulled out a business card from her desk drawer and handed it to me. "This is Ann Kensington. She's a family law attorney who does pro bono work for teenagers in difficult situations. Call her. Tell her I referred you. She'll at least give you guidance on what your options are. I took the card, stared at the embossed lettering. Anne Kensington, Esquire Family Law and Advocacy, a New Haven address and phone number. Thank you, I managed. She gave me a sad smile. Danny, I want you to know that whatever the truth is about your adoption, whatever you find out, it doesn't change who you are. You're still the same person you were before you knew. The same smart, capable, kind young man. Don't lose sight of that. Her words were meant to be comforting, but they rang hollow. How could I be the same person when I didn't even know who that person actually was? When the name I'd carried for 17 years might not be the one I was born with? When the family I'd loved and trusted might be built on theft and lies? I called Anne Kensington from my car in the school parking lot. Her receptionist answered, professional and brisk. I explained that Mrs. Ramirez had referred me, that I needed legal advice about a possible adoption irregularity. The receptionist put me on hold. When she came back, she said Miss Kensington could see me Monday at 4 o'clock. I'd have to skip track practice, but that seemed irrelevant compared to everything else. I spent the weekend in a fog. Saturday, I pretended to have homework and stayed in my room. Sunday, my parents suggested we all go to brunch, a family tradition we'd maintained for years. I made up an excuse about studying for finals. My mom looked hurt. My dad looked suspicious. Lily didn't care. That night, my dad knocked on my door around 9 o'clock. Can we talk? He asked. My heart rate spiked. Did he know? Had they somehow figured out what I was doing? I opened the door. He came in, looked around my room like he was seeing it for the first time, then sat on my desk chair. I stayed standing, my back against the door, ready to bolt if necessary. Your mom's worried about you, he said. Says you've been distant, not eating much. She wants to know if something's wrong. I shrugged, aimed for casual. Just stressed about school, college stuff. He studied me with that penetrating look that had always made me feel like he could see right through me when I was lying about homework or where I'd been on a Friday night. That's all? Nothing else bothering you? This was my chance. I could confront him right now, demand the truth, force the conversation they'd been avoiding for 17 years. But something held me back. Maybe cowardice. Maybe strategy. Maybe the small, desperate part of me that still wanted to believe this was all a misunderstanding, that there was some explanation that would make everything okay again. That's all, I lied. He didn't believe me. I could see it in his eyes. But he nodded anyway, stood up, put a hand on my shoulder. You know you can talk to us about anything, right? Me and your mom. Whatever it is, we're here for you. The irony was so thick I could choke on it. I just nodded, waited for him to leave, then locked my door and lay on my bed staring at the ceiling until dawn. Monday afternoon, I drove to New Haven and found Anne Kensington's office in a renovated brownstone near Yale campus. The waiting room was tasteful but not ostentatious. Leather chairs and bookshelves, diplomas on the wall. Yale Law School, 1998. Various legal awards and certifications. She'd been practicing for over 25 years. The receptionist offered me water. I declined. My stomach was in knots. After 10 minutes that felt like hours, a woman in her early 50s emerged from an inner office. She had short gray hair, sharp eyes, and an air of competence that was simultaneously comforting and intimidating. Daniel, I'm Anne Kensington. Come on back. Her office was lined with law books and filing cabinets. She gestured to a chair across from her desk. Patricia Ramirez called me after you made your appointment, gave me some background on your situation, but I'd like to hear it from you directly. I told her everything. The overheard conversation, the adoption decree, the missing baby photos, my growing certainty that something was fundamentally wrong with my origin story. She took notes on a legal pad, asking questions occasionally, her expression neutral. When I finished, she set down her pen and looked at me directly. What you're describing could be a few different things, she said. It could be a standard closed adoption where your birth parents requested privacy and your adoptive parents honored that. It could be an informal or illegal adoption that was later legitimized through the courts. Or it could be something more serious, like parental kidnapping or child trafficking, that was covered up with fraudulent documents. Child trafficking. The words made my vision swim. I'd thought about kidnapping, about my parents taking me from someone who loved me. But trafficking implied something darker, more organized, more evil. How do I find out which one it is? I asked. She leaned back in her chair. That's complicated. Adoption records in Connecticut are sealed. You can petition to have them unsealed when you turn 18, but that's still several months away for you. And even then, if there was something illegal about the adoption, those records might not tell the whole truth. So I'm just supposed to wait? Do nothing? I didn't say that. There are other avenues. I can file a motion for discovery based on suspected adoption fraud, but that requires evidence. Right now, all you have is an overheard conversation and some suspicions. Courts need more than that. I pulled out my phone, showed her the photos I'd taken of the adoption decree. She studied them, zoomed in, her expression growing more serious. This is from 2007, which means it's past the standard adoption waiting period. The heavy redactions are unusual for a standard closed adoption. They typically black out the birth parents' names, but this looks like entire sections have been removed. She looked up at me. I'm going to be frank with you, Daniel. If there was something illegal about your adoption, your parents could face serious criminal charges. We're talking about kidnapping, which in Connecticut carries a sentence of up to 30 years. Are you prepared for that possibility? I hadn't really thought about it in those terms. Prison. My parents in prison. Lily losing both her parents, becoming effectively an orphan. And me. What would happen to me? Would I go back to my birth family if they could be found? Would I go into foster care? At 17, I'd be aging out of the system in less than a year anyway. The practical implications were overwhelming. I just want to know the truth, I said, my voice sounding younger than 17. Whatever it is, I need to know. Anne Kensington nodded slowly. Okay, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to make some inquiries with my contacts at the state's adoption registry. I'm also going to reach out to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children and see if there are any open cases that match your basic description. Birth date, location, gender. It's a long shot, but if you were reported missing, there might be a file. She paused. This is going to take some time, and it's possible we won't find anything conclusive. Are you still living at home? I nodded. Can you continue to do that safely? I need to know if you're in any danger. I thought about my parents. My mom, who made me breakfast every morning. My dad, who'd taught me to ride a bike and helped me with my math homework and never missed a track meet. They'd lied to me, maybe stolen me, but they'd never hurt me. I'm safe, I said. Okay, give me 2 weeks. I'll see what I can find. In the meantime, try to act normal at home. Don't let on that you know anything or that you're investigating. If your parents realize what you're doing, they could destroy evidence or flee. The next 2 weeks were the longest of my life. I went through the motions at school, forced myself to eat enough that my parents wouldn't worry, showed up to track practice and pretended everything was fine. Kyle cornered me one afternoon and asked point blank what was going on. You've been weird for over a month, man. Is it a girl? Family stuff? You can tell me. I wanted to. The secret was eating me alive, and Kyle had been my best friend since elementary school. But how could I drag him into this? How could I ask him to keep this kind of secret, to lie by omission to our teachers, our friends, possibly the police? Family stuff, I said, but I can't talk about it yet. Soon, maybe. He looked hurt, but accepted it. Just promise me you're okay. Like, actually okay. I couldn't promise that, so I just nodded and changed the subject. On a Thursday night, 10 days after my meeting with Anne Kensington, I got an email from her. Please call me at your earliest convenience. I found something. I waited until my parents were asleep, then called from my car parked down the street from our house. She answered on the second ring. Daniel, thank you for calling. I have some information, and I wanted to deliver it personally rather than over email. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. What did you find? There's a case in the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children database. A male infant, born March 15, 2007, taken from a hospital in Providence, Rhode Island, 2 days after birth. The mother reported him missing. The case was never solved. Providence, Rhode Island, less than 2 hours from Hartford. The details matched. My birthday matched. What was his name? I asked. My voice sounded distant, like it was coming from someone else. The mother named him Samuel. Samuel Christopher Brennan. Samuel. Not Daniel. Samuel. I had a name, a real name, and it wasn't the one I'd been using for 17 years. There's more, Anne continued. I reached out to the detective who worked the case. He's retired now, but he remembered it. The mother's name is Elizabeth Brennan. She was 19 when you were born, single, living with her parents. The hospital staff reported the baby missing after she fell asleep and woke up to find the bassinet empty. Security footage showed a woman matching your adoptive mother's description leaving the hospital with an infant, but the video quality was poor and no one was ever arrested. My adoptive mother, Rebecca Thompson. The woman who'd raised me, loved me, tucked me in at night and helped me with my homework and cheered at my track meets, had walked out of a hospital with a stolen baby and built her entire life around that crime. What happens now? I asked. That's up to you, Anne said. You're 17, which means you have some agency here. We can contact Elizabeth Brennan, let her know we think we've found her son. We can contact law enforcement and file a report. Or we can wait until you're 18 and you can make these decisions as a legal adult. But Daniel, you need to understand something. Once this information is out, there's no putting it back. Your parents will be arrested. Your entire family will be torn apart. You'll likely be placed in contact with your biological mother, and that's going to be complicated and potentially traumatic for everyone involved. I sat in my car, watching my house through the windshield. The lights were all off except for the porch light my mom always left on for me. Inside, my parents were sleeping. My sister was sleeping. Our dog was probably sprawling across the couch like he always did when he thought no one was watching. It looked so normal, so safe, so much like a real home. But it was built on a lie, on theft, on a teenage girl's unimaginable grief. I need to think about it, I told Anne. She said that was understandable, that I should take my time, that this wasn't a decision to make lightly. We hung up. I sat in the darkness for another hour before going back inside. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw a 19-year-old girl waking up in a hospital to find her baby gone. I imagined her panic, her terror, her frantic calls for the nurses. I thought about her parents, my grandparents, people I'd never met who'd lost their grandson before they'd even gotten to hold him. I thought about all the birthdays they'd marked with grief instead of celebration, wondering if I was alive, if I was safe, if I'd ever come home. And then I thought about my parents, the Thompsons, who'd raised me with what seemed like genuine love despite the horrific crime at the foundation of our family. How did you steal a baby and then go on to be a normal, functioning parent? How did you live with that guilt, that knowledge, for 17 years? The cognitive dissonance was overwhelming. Friday morning, I woke up with a decision made. I couldn't live with the lie anymore. Whatever happened next, however badly this destroyed our family, I needed the truth out in the open. I needed Elizabeth Brennan to know her son was alive. I needed my biological family to have a chance to know me, even if that relationship would be complicated and painful. And yes, I needed my parents to face consequences for what they'd done. Not because I hated them, not because I wanted revenge, but because some crimes were too big to just ignore, even when the criminals were people you loved. I called Ann Kensington before school. I want to move forward, I said. Contact Elizabeth Brennan. Contact the police. Do whatever needs to be done. There was a pause on the other end. Are you sure? Once we start this, there's no stopping it. I'm sure. Okay, I'll make the calls today. Daniel, I want you to know that what you're doing is incredibly brave. It's also going to be incredibly hard. Do you have support? Friends? Other family? I thought about Kyle, about my track teammates, about Mrs. Ramirez. I'll figure it out, I said. Anne called me back 3 hours later. I was sitting in the library during my free period, supposedly studying for a calculus test. I spoke with Elizabeth Brennan, she said. Daniel, she's been searching for you for 17 years. She never gave up hope. When I told her we might have found you, she broke down crying. I felt my own eyes burn. 17 years. She'd spent more than half her life looking for me, missing me, grieving me. What happens now? I've also contacted Detective William Thornton with the Connecticut State Police. He specializes in cold cases involving missing children. He wants to meet with you, get your statement, review the evidence. Then they'll likely move quickly to arrest your parents before they can flee or destroy evidence. You need to prepare yourself for that, Daniel. They'll probably arrest them at home, possibly while you and your sister are there. The image of my parents in handcuffs, Lily screaming, police cars in our driveway, neighbors watching, made me want to throw up. But I'd made my choice. When? Detective Thornton wants to meet Monday afternoon. I'll be there with you. After that, things will move fast. I spent the weekend in a dissociative haze, watching my family like I was already on the outside looking in. Saturday morning, my mom made pancakes. Lily complained about her phone being too slow. My dad read the paper and laughed at a comic strip, showing it to my mom. They seemed so normal, so unremarkable, so far from the kind of people who would steal a baby from a hospital. Sunday, we went to brunch like we used to, the first time in weeks I'd agreed to go. I ordered waffles and forced myself to eat them. My mom squeezed my hand across the table. It's good to have you back, she said, smiling. I smiled back, knowing it was probably the last normal meal we'd ever share as a family. That night, I wrote a letter to Lily and hid it in her room. I explained everything, told her I loved her, told her none of this was her fault. I didn't know if she'd ever read it or if she'd hate me forever for destroying our family. Both seemed possible. Monday afternoon, I met Detective William Thornton and Ann Kensington at the police station. Thornton was in his late 40s, had been with the state police for 23 years, and had kind eyes that didn't match the gravity of what we were discussing. I gave him my statement, showed him the photos of the adoption decree, told him everything I knew. He recorded it all, asked clarifying questions, his expression getting darker as the story unfolded. We'll need to verify your identity first, he said. DNA test to confirm you're Samuel Brennan. That'll take a few days. In the meantime, I'm going to get a warrant for your parents' arrest and to search your home for evidence. Daniel, I need you to understand that you'll need to leave the house. You can't be there when we execute the warrant. Where will I go? We've contacted Elizabeth Brennan. She lives in Massachusetts now, has a family. She's willing to have you stay with her temporarily while we sort this out, if you're comfortable with that. Stay with my biological mother, a complete stranger, while police tore apart the only home I'd ever known. Nothing about this was comfortable, but I nodded anyway. The DNA test was a simple cheek swab. They sent it to a lab with a rush order. Thornton said we'd have results in 72 hours. In the meantime, I had to go home and pretend everything was normal for 3 more days. I had to sit across from my parents at dinner, had to respond to my mom's questions about my day, had to avoid my dad's increasingly suspicious glances. On Wednesday night, he cornered me in the kitchen after Lily had gone upstairs. I know something's going on, he said. His voice was quiet, but intense. Whatever it is, whatever you think you know, we can talk about it. As a family. I looked at him, this man who'd been my father for 17 years, who'd coached my little league team and taught me to drive and helped me study for the SATs. Can we? I asked. Can we really? His expression crumbled. He knew. In that moment, I could see that he knew I'd found out, and he knew what was coming. Danny. My name isn't Danny, I said. The words came out harder than I'd intended. It's Samuel Christopher Brennan. And you knew that. You've always known that. He stood there, frozen, the color draining from his face. From upstairs, we could hear Lily's music playing through her bedroom door. Normal teenage sounds in a house that was about to explode. How long have you known? He asked finally. Does it matter? Your mother and I, we loved you. We gave you a good life. Doesn't that count for something? I thought about Elizabeth Brennan, about the 19-year-old girl who'd woken up to find her baby stolen, who'd spent 17 years searching. You didn't give me a life, I said. You took one from someone else and pretended it was yours to give. He opened his mouth to respond, but my phone buzzed. A text from Ann Kensington. DNA results confirmed. You're Samuel Brennan. Police moving in tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. I'll pick you up at 5:30. I looked at my dad. They're coming for you tomorrow. Detective Thornton with the state police. They have a warrant. I watched the information land, watched him process it. His hand gripped the counter so hard his knuckles went white. Where's your mother? In the living room, watching TV. He walked past me without another word. I heard him say something to my mom, heard her sharp intake of breath, heard them go into their bedroom and close the door. I stood in the kitchen alone, listening to my family disintegrate. I didn't sleep that night. At 5:15 a.m., I heard my parents' bedroom door open, footsteps on the stairs. I was already dressed, my backpack packed with essentials, sitting on my bed waiting. My door opened. My mom stood there in her bathrobe, her face swollen from crying. You're really doing this, she said. It wasn't a question. I don't have a choice. Everyone has a choice, Danny. Samuel. Whoever you think you are now. She stepped into my room, and I fought the urge to back away. I held you. I fed you. I stayed up with you when you were sick. I taught you to read. I was there for every birthday, every Christmas, every important moment of your life. Doesn't that make me your mother? I thought about how to answer that, about all the complicated truth of it. You were my mother, I said finally. But you were someone else's first, and you knew that. Every single day, you knew that. Her hand went to her mouth. We were going to tell you, when you were older, when you could understand. When I was older? I'm 17. When would have been the right time to tell me you stole me from a hospital? We didn't steal you. We saved you. Your birth mother, she was 19, alone. She couldn't take care of you properly. That wasn't your decision to make. The words came out louder than I'd intended. Upstairs, I heard Lily's door open. What's going on? She called down. Go back to bed, sweetheart, my mom said, her voice breaking. Danny and I are just talking. But Lily came downstairs anyway, sensing something was catastrophically wrong. She looked from me to our mom, taking in my packed bag, my mom's tears, the tension crackling in the air. What's happening? Why do you have a bag? I looked at my mom. She was supposed to be the adult here, the one who explained things, but she just stood there crying, so I did it instead. Lily, there's something you need to know about me, about all of us. I told her everything. The overheard conversation, the adoption, the investigation, the DNA test, the police coming in less than 30 minutes. She listened with her mouth open, her expression cycling through disbelief, confusion, anger, betrayal. When I finished, she just stared at me. You're lying, she said. This is some kind of sick joke. I'm not lying, I wish I was. She turned to our mom. Tell him he's lying. Tell him this is insane. But our mom couldn't. She just shook her head, tears streaming down her face. Oh my God, Lily whispered. Oh my God, it's true. You stole him. You actually stole him. She backed away from both of us like we were contaminated. My dad appeared at the top of the stairs. The police are here, he said. His voice was flat, defeated. They're outside. Through the window, I could see the flashing lights. 3 police cars, an unmarked vehicle. Detective Thornton getting out, straightening his jacket. Ann Kensington pulling up behind them in her sedan. This was it. The moment everything changed forever. My mom grabbed my arm. Please, please don't let them do this. Tell them you made a mistake. Tell them you want to stay with us. I pulled away gently. I can't. You know I can't. The doorbell rang. My dad went to answer it. Through the doorway, I could see Detective Thornton holding up his badge and a piece of paper. David Thompson? Rebecca Thompson? We have a warrant for your arrest for kidnapping, and a warrant to search these premises. You need to come with us now. My mom made a sound like a wounded animal. Lily was crying, screaming questions that no one could answer. 2 officers moved past my dad, one heading for my mom, both pulling out handcuffs. You have the right to remain silent. I walked out the front door as they were reading my parents their rights, as Lily collapsed on the stairs sobbing, as our neighbors emerged from their houses to watch the spectacle. Ann Kensington met me at her car. Are you okay? She asked. I wasn't. I didn't think I'd ever be okay again. But I got in the car anyway. As we drove away, I watched my house recede in the side mirror. Police officers were going inside, starting their search. My parents were being put into separate police cars. Lily was being approached by what looked like a social worker. The home I'd grown up in, the life I'd known, was being dismantled piece by piece, and I was the one who'd set it in motion. The drive to Massachusetts took 2 hours. Anne tried to make conversation, but I couldn't focus on anything she was saying. My phone kept buzzing with texts from Lily, from Kyle, from people who'd seen the news or heard rumors. I turned it off. Anne filled the silence with practical information. Elizabeth Brennan lived in a town called Easton, south of Boston. She'd remarried, had 2 other children, a daughter and a son. She'd been notified that I was coming, that the arrest had been made. She was, according to Anne, overwhelmed with emotion, but eager to meet you. I tried to imagine what that meeting would be like. Hi, I'm the son you lost 17 years ago. Sorry about the traumatic abduction and decades of grief. Nice to finally meet you. The absurdity of it made my head spin. We pulled up to a 2-story colonial house with a neat lawn and a basketball hoop in the driveway. Before Anne had even turned off the engine, the front door opened. A woman stepped out, mid-30s, with dark hair and eyes that looked startlingly familiar, even though I'd never seen her before. She was crying before I was even out of the car. I stood there awkwardly, my backpack slung over one shoulder, not sure what the protocol was for meeting the mother who'd lost you. She crossed the lawn in 5 steps and pulled me into a hug so tight I could barely breathe. Samuel, she sobbed into my shoulder. My baby. My Samuel. I stood there rigid, arms at my sides, completely unprepared for the physical reality of this moment. She smelled like vanilla and coffee and something else I couldn't identify. She was shorter than me by several inches, which seemed wrong. Mothers weren't supposed to be shorter than their sons. But I'd grown up without her, shot past her height without her there to witness it. She pulled back, held me at arm's length, studying my face like she was trying to memorize it. You look like my father, she said, laughing through tears. Same eyes, same nose. I thought I'd never see him in another face after he died, but here you are. Inside, her husband waited with their children. Robert Brennan, quiet and kind-looking, gave me a firm handshake and said he was glad I was safe. The 2 kids, Melissa, who was 12, and Nathan, who was 9, stared at me with a mix of curiosity and wariness. I was their brother, apparently. A sibling they'd never known existed, dropped into their lives without warning. Elizabeth made tea, and we sat at the kitchen table, Anne Kensington staying for moral support. I don't know where to start, Elizabeth said. I have 17 years of questions, and I don't even know which ones to ask first. How about why you gave me up? I asked. The words came out harsher than I'd intended, but I needed to know. She flinched. I didn't give you up. I would never have given you up. I was 19, yes, and I wasn't married, but I wanted you. I'd spent 9 months planning for you, getting ready, so excited to be a mother. Her voice cracked. I fell asleep in the hospital just for an hour. When I woke up, you were gone. The bassinet was empty. I screamed for the nurses, thought maybe they'd taken you for tests, but no one knew where you were. Security footage showed a woman in scrubs walking out with a baby, but her face was partially covered and the footage was grainy. The police investigated, but there were no leads. You just vanished. Did you know the Thompsons? The people who took me? No. I'd never heard their names before yesterday when the detective called. I don't know how they knew about me, or how they got into the hospital, or why they chose me. Maybe it was random. Maybe they'd been watching, waiting for an opportunity. I'll never know. She reached across the table like she wanted to take my hand, but stopped short, respecting my space. I searched for you for so long. I put up flyers, called the police every week for years, kept your case active on every missing children's website. I couldn't move on. I couldn't let you go. People told me I needed to accept that you were probably dead, that whoever took you might have hurt you, but I knew you were alive. I could feel it. I thought about all those years she'd spent searching while I'd been living less than 2 hours away, completely unaware. The proximity of it was sickening. We'd probably driven past each other on the highway at some point. Might have been in the same shopping mall or restaurant without knowing. What happens now? I asked. Anne Kensington fielded this one. Your parents are being held pending arraignment. They'll likely be charged with kidnapping, child abduction, fraud, and possibly additional crimes depending on what the investigation uncovers. The trial will take months, possibly over a year. In the meantime, you have some choices to make. What kind of choices? You're 17, which means you're still a minor. Normally in a situation like this, you'd be placed with family. Elizabeth is your biological mother, but you've never lived with her. The court will have to decide what's in your best interest. You could stay here, or you could be placed in foster care, or there might be other options. I want to stay here, Elizabeth said quickly. I want to get to know him. I want to have the relationship we should have had all along. I looked at this woman who was technically my mother, but felt like a stranger. Could I really live here, with these people I didn't know, in this house that wasn't mine? Could I restart my life in a new place, a new school, with a new family, while my old life imploded back in Connecticut? I need some time, I said, to think about it, to process everything. Elizabeth looked disappointed, but nodded. Of course. Take all the time you need. We're not going anywhere. I stayed in Elizabeth's guest room that night, a tidy space with neutral walls and a bed that was too soft. I couldn't sleep. Around midnight, I turned my phone back on and immediately regretted it. Hundreds of messages flooded in, most from numbers I didn't recognize, reporters asking for interviews, strangers offering sympathy or judgment. There were messages from classmates, most shocked, some supportive, a few cruel. Kyle had sent 43 texts, increasingly frantic. Man, what the hell is going on? Why are the police at your house? Call me, please. Everyone's saying your parents kidnapped you? Danny, seriously, are you okay? I texted back, I'm okay, long story, I'll explain when I can. He responded immediately, where are you? Can I call? We talked for an hour. I told him everything, from the overheard conversation to the DNA test to the arrest. He listened mostly in silence, occasionally interjecting with disbelief or anger or sympathy. So what are you going to do? He asked finally. I have no idea. Everything I thought I knew about my life was a lie. I don't even know who I am anymore. You're still you, man. You're still the same person you were last week. None of this changes that you're smart and kind and a good friend. Your parents made terrible choices, but that's not on you. His words echoed what Mrs. Ramirez had said, what Ann Kensington had implied. Everyone wanted to reassure me that I was still me. But how could I be when the foundation of my identity had been revealed as fiction? The story broke nationally the next day. Infant stolen from hospital 17 years ago, found living normal life with abductors. It was everywhere. Local news, national news, social media. My school photo was circulating online, photos of my parents being led away in handcuffs, speculation and hot takes from people who knew nothing about the situation. I became a hashtag, a trending topic, a case study in how far people would go to have a child. Elizabeth tried to shield me from it, but it was impossible. The news vans parked outside her house, reporters knocking on the door, neighbors being interviewed about their shock that the Brennans' long-lost son had been found. I stayed inside, watched my old life dissected on television by strangers who thought they understood the complexity of what I was feeling. A reporter on CNN said I must be relieved to finally be with my real family. Another on Fox News questioned whether I'd been brainwashed into loving my kidnappers. Social media was even worse. People arguing about whether my parents deserved sympathy because they'd raised me well, or whether that made their crime even worse because they'd known better. People debating what I should call myself now, Daniel or Samuel, as if it was their decision to make. On Thursday, 3 days after the arrest, I got a call from Lily. Her voice was small and broken. They wouldn't let me see you, she said. I wanted to, but the social worker said I couldn't. How are you doing? I asked, though it was obviously a stupid question. How do you think? Our parents are in jail. You're gone. I'm staying with Aunt Linda, and she keeps asking me questions I can't answer, because I don't understand any of this. Aunt Linda was our mom's sister, lived in Rhode Island, visited occasionally for holidays. I'm sorry, I said. For what? None of this is your fault. Mom and Dad did this. They're the ones who lied. But she sounded angry anyway, like maybe part of her did blame me for exposing the truth instead of letting us all continue living in comfortable ignorance. Are you coming back? She asked. I don't know. I don't think so. So that's it? You're just going to become a Brennan and forget about us? That's not fair, Lily. None of this is fair. She was crying now. You were my brother. For my whole life, you were my brother. And now you're not. And I don't know what you are, and I don't know how to feel about any of this. I'm still your brother, I said. Maybe not biologically, but don't. Just don't. Biology is the only thing that matters in this situation. That's literally the whole point. She hung up. I tried to call back, but she didn't answer. The preliminary hearing happened a week later. I wasn't required to attend, but Ann Kensington thought it would be good for me to be there, to see the legal process unfold. We sat in the back of the courtroom. My parents were brought in wearing orange jumpsuits, their hands cuffed. My mom looked like she'd aged 10 years in a week. My dad wouldn't look at me. The prosecutor outlined the charges: kidnapping in the first degree, custodial interference, fraud, identity theft. Their lawyer, a tired-looking public defender named Marcus Lewis, argued for reduced bail. My clients have no criminal history, strong ties to the community, and pose no flight risk. The judge wasn't convinced. They kidnapped an infant from a hospital and spent 17 years evading detection. Bail is set at $500,000 each. My parents couldn't afford that. They'd be staying in jail until trial. As they were let out, my mom finally looked at me. Her expression was pleading, desperate, full of a grief so profound it made my chest ache. But I looked away. I couldn't give her what she wanted. I couldn't forgive her. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Elizabeth was waiting outside the courthouse. Reporters mobbed us, shouting questions. Samuel, how does it feel to be reunited with your biological mother? Do you plan to reconcile with the Thompsons? Are you angry? Ann Kensington ran interference while Elizabeth guided me to the car. Once inside, she turned to me. I know this is overwhelming. I know you're going through something I can't even imagine. But I want you to know that whatever you decide, wherever you want to be, I support you. If you want to go back to Connecticut, to your school, to your friends, we'll figure it out. If you want to stay here, you're welcome as long as you want. And if you need space from all of us, that's okay too. I appreciated the gesture, but it also highlighted how impossible my situation was. There was no good choice. Stay in Massachusetts with a biological family that felt like strangers, or go back to Connecticut where my adoptive parents were in jail and my whole community knew me as the kidnapped kid. Start senior year at a new school where I was the tragic news story, or return to my old school where I was equally infamous. Change my name to Samuel, honoring the identity I'd been born with, or keep Daniel, honoring the person I'd become. Every option was terrible in different ways. I decided to go back to Connecticut for senior year. Elizabeth was hurt, but understanding. I'd visit Massachusetts on weekends, try to build a relationship with her and her family, but I couldn't just abandon the life I'd built, even if that life was built on lies. Mrs. Ramirez helped arrange for me to stay with Kyle's family. His parents were kind, asked few questions, gave me space to process. Returning to school was surreal. Everyone knew. The story had been too big, too sensational for anyone to miss. People stared at me in hallways, whispered when I walked past. Some reached out with genuine sympathy. Others treated me like a curiosity, asking invasive questions about how it felt to find out my parents weren't my parents. A few avoided me entirely, like trauma was contagious. Kyle stayed constant, my anchor in the chaos. We didn't talk about it unless I brought it up. We just existed together the way we always had, playing video games and arguing about music and doing homework. Normal teenage stuff that felt precious, now that I understood how quickly normal could be destroyed. The trial started in January, 9 months after the arrest. I was required to testify, which I'd been dreading. Sitting in the witness box, looking at my parents across the courtroom, was one of the hardest things I'd ever done. The prosecutor asked me to describe my relationship with the Thompsons. I told the truth. They'd been good parents. Loving, supportive, present. I'd never wanted for anything. I'd felt safe and loved. But the prosecutor pushed. Did they ever tell you that you were adopted? No. Did they ever tell you that your biological mother was searching for you? No. Did they ever give you the opportunity to know your real family? No. The defense attorney tried to paint a picture of my parents as desperate, infertile people who'd made one terrible mistake driven by an all-consuming desire to be parents. They brought in character witnesses who testified about what good people the Thompsons were, how dedicated to their community, how much they loved their children. It made me sick. Because it was all true, and it was all irrelevant. Good people could do monstrous things. Love didn't erase the crime. Elizabeth testified about the years she'd spent searching, the nights she'd cried herself to sleep, the birthdays and Christmases marked by grief instead of celebration. She described waking up in that hospital to find me gone, the panic and horror of that moment. Her testimony was devastating, and several jurors were crying by the time she finished. The verdict came back in 3 days. Guilty on all counts. My mom collapsed in the courtroom. My dad stood rigid, his face blank. Sentencing was set for 6 weeks later. The judge gave them each 18 years, noting the premeditation involved, the years of deception, the profound harm caused to Elizabeth Brennan and to me. 18 years. They'd be in prison until I was 35. Lily would be 32. We'd be different people by then, shaped by experiences and years they'd have no part in. The family we'd been was over. It could never be rebuilt or reclaimed. I visit them sometimes. Not often. Maybe every few months. Lily comes with me occasionally, though it's harder for her. She lost more than I did in some ways. Lost both her parents and her only sibling all at once. We're working on our relationship, me and Lily, trying to figure out what we are to each other now. My relationship with Elizabeth Brennan is slowly developing. We talk on the phone weekly, visit monthly. She's patient with my guardedness, doesn't push for more than I can give. Her other kids, Melissa and Nathan, are curious about me but respectful of the weirdness. We're building something, though I'm not sure what to call it yet. Not quite a family, not anymore just strangers. Something in between. I go by Samuel now, legally changed it when I turned 18. It felt important to honor the name Elizabeth gave me, the identity I should have had. But I still answer to Danny sometimes, still slip and introduce myself that way. 17 years of conditioning doesn't disappear overnight. I'm in college now, studying psychology. I want to understand family dynamics, trauma, identity formation. I want to make sense of what happened to me and help others make sense of their own complicated situations. Kyle's at a different school, but we talk all the time, still best friends, still that constant anchor. Mrs. Ramirez writes to me occasionally, checking in, proud of how I'm doing. Ann Kensington waived her fees for the legal work, said she was honored to help. People tell me I'm resilient, that I handled an impossible situation with remarkable maturity. Maybe. Or maybe I'm just surviving the way anyone would, day by day, putting one foot in front of the other, because the alternative is standing still and drowning in the enormity of it all. I don't know if I'll ever fully forgive my parents. Some days I understand their desperation, their longing for a child, the way they must have rationalized their crime over the years. Other days I'm furious at them for stealing not just me, but all the years Elizabeth and I should have had together, all the memories we'll never make. The truth is, probably that I'll carry both things forever. Love and anger intertwined so tightly I can't separate them. That's the legacy of their choice, the thing I'll spend the rest of my life processing. But I'm here. I'm alive. And I know the truth now. I know where I came from. I know my real name. And that has to count for something. It has to be enough. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.